Collective bargaining has failed South Africa. This is the view of the National Employers Association, expressed in an open letter to the Minister of Labour.
NEASA has criticised the collective bargaining system, calling it a sham which marginalises SMMEs. NEASA's Chief Executive Gerhard Papenfus joins us in studio now for more. Thanks so much, Gerhard, for joining us in studio. So you've written an open letter to the Minister of Labour, and in that letter it's apparent that your relationship is a strained one, with the department not having engaged or communicated with you. Has the open letter initiated anything from that end as yet?
No, not yet. It's too soon perhaps, but I don't expect anything. I think the department is to some extent ideologically committed, and I think engaging us will to some extent cause an embarrassment.
Gerhard, maybe go back a step and tell us why you feel that collective bargaining isn't working, why SMMEs are being marginalised, and why they don't get an equal say in wage negotiations, for instance.
Yeah, the first thing starts with the Act itself, and it's a strange thing, but I think it was done to keep collective bargaining alive from the outset. The Act is written in a way that prejudices small business. In the voting process, and I said it in my letter, business isn't counted as business, it's counted in terms of the number of the employees you employ. And I said it in the letter, if you have 10 companies each employing 1,000 employees, you can only match that with 1,000 companies each employing 10 employees. Now, what is happening is that your bigger business participate in collective bargaining because it suits them. They get the results which they want. And this is not an anti-business discussion, this is simply how it is. So what you have is that big business, normally situated in the economic hubs of the country, participate in collective bargaining. They make deals with the union, and then through the office of the minister, and that's where the second problem lies, that these deals are then extended to the rest of the country, and that enforce those deals on smaller businesses.
I mean, it stands to reason that a large employer with 1,000 workers should have more say in the process than somebody that has like 5 workers. Well,
it's not so. You know, when I go to vote, it doesn't matter how much I own. I have one vote. I might be a tax payer, keeping a lot of people alive. But if it comes to the voting booth, it's one person, one vote, whether you're rich or poor, and that same arrangement should apply in business.
So are you advocating then equal voting power, or would you be looking to a separate bargaining system altogether for SMMEs?
Well, if that could happen, of course that's first prize. But if that can't happen, there must be an issue of one business, one vote type of thing. You cannot, small business is simply not participating in the system. NEASA has got involved, and we actually done very well in getting businesses involved, but we are marginalized, and that's why we have to revert to the courts every time, because that brings you to the second leg of the system, where the department is simply failing the country in that extent.
Gerhard, before you continue, perhaps to look at a practical example. So last year we had that strike in the manufacturing sector. CIFSA and the unions eventually settled on a 10% wage increase, which was then forced onto your members. And your members, some of them couldn't afford a 10% increase. And at the time you said many businesses will go out of business because of that 10% increase. Did they go out of business? Did you contest this in the courts?
Well, it's in the process. It's currently being contested, but it's going to take a while. Business did not necessarily go out of business. There were retrenchments. There are still retrenchments. But businesses aren't complying, because we've informed business that this deal is illegal. So what is our advice to business? Pay what you can. That is a free market principle, pay what you can. You know, that is in the compelling people to pay a 10% deal which they simply cannot afford. That takes them out of it, that will. The fact that we are in the market telling business, do not comply because the deal is illegal in various respects. And we will challenge it, we are challenging it, I believe we will eventually be successful, as we were successful in the previous deal, which took us 4 years and millions of rands.
Paid for by your members.
Paid for by my members, yeah. What the Department of Labour doing here, and I don't put so much blame on the minister, and then when I put blame on advisors, I understand the predicament ministers find themselves, and I mean they can't read through thousands of pages of documents. But their advisors, there are commitments made to extend the deals, agreements long before the agreements lined on the table. And I think what's happening is the department is simply committed to protect the system.
If you're looking at some of the repercussions of, what you've been advocating, pay what you can, have you seen any fallout in terms of the relationship between employer and employees?
Not really. Strangely enough, collective bargaining has alienated employers and employees to a very large extent, because negotiations is happening now centrally, and employers do not engage with employees. What you get in smaller companies is that employers are actually engaging with the employees. Well, the fact is, if you can't pay it, you can't pay it, and that is the reality. So it's either closure of the company, it's either a question of retrenching, or we pay what we can, and all employers have given increases. So if you can give 10, give 10. If you can give more than 10, give it.
I ask the question, of course, because it's a reality that often, union members or employees don't really buy into or, can't understand. So has there been any strain on those relations?
There may have, but not to the extent that I'm even aware of. Yeah.
What's the answer in your view, Gerhard? Is it to dispense of the collective bargaining system altogether, or to have a separate collective bargaining system for smaller players in the sector?
Well, there's two options. Remove the Provisional Labour Relations Act, which count business not for being business, but in terms of the number of employees. That's the first thing. If that can't happen, then have separate bargaining arrangements, which I don't know necessarily whether it's ideal. Why can't bigger businesses pay more and smaller businesses pay less? How can you have an arrangement where a big guy sitting in Johannesburg pays a particular wage?
Doesn't mean that because they're big, they're profitable and can afford big increases, though.
Well, of course not. But that's up to you to do that. But yes, the thing is that you get price givers and price receivers. If you're a primary steel producer, you can incorporate the price of a wage increase into your price of your steel, and you sell it to the guy lower down the chain. He pays twice. He's paying for his increase, and he's paying for the increase in the price of the product. So he pays twice, you don't pay at all. He cannot do that because his customers are price sensitive. And what is happening here is that employers, instead of manufacturing stuff here anymore, is now manufacturing in India and China and all these places, because we're simply no longer competitive. Now, if one employer does that, and they are doing it, the next guy is forced to do it.
Surely this puts the spotlight on salaries paid in the first place, and whether your SMEs are paying salaries to the extent that your bigger players are paying, because that percentage would be skewed by that as well.
Well, the fact is, living standards, and perhaps I'm not answering your question, the standards of living in a place like Kuruman, and the standards of living and expenses, what you're required to live in Joburg is much higher than what you're required to live in Kuruman. If you pay a person in Kuruman what is the minimum wage in a certain industry, he will almost be the highest paid person in town. But still, that wage is enforced in that town. But look, there's just the market is the only place where price could be determined. If you set a price higher than what the market can afford and want to pay, they will find a way now to pay it. And the first thing is to reduce working hours. Second thing is to retrench, reduce your workforce. But this is a pipe dream to think, for a council to think, or the government, and that falls on the area of minimum wages, which is a different debate altogether, is that you can tell an employer what to pay. The only education, a particular view in terms of the person and what you can afford is the only thing that can determine a wage. You set it beyond that, employers won't pay it because they either can't or they won't do it.
Well, what have your interactions with the Department of Labour been so far? So you've written this letter. I presume you've not heard back yet. But over the past year, throughout all this, what have the interactions been?
Lacking, very lacking, because they don't want to hear what we're telling them. In fact, I mean, we've been to court. I recall discussions which we had 4 years ago with the department telling them, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. The answer is, well, then take us to court. I mean, it is clear-cut. They make mistakes. It is so obvious. And the argument is, well, if that's the case, let the court decide. And we say, well, this is what the court will decide because this is blatantly wrong. But if you've committed yourself in terms of we will do it and let NEASA go to court and fight us there, well, that, I think, unfortunately, is more or less the approach. Let's do it. It'll take them a couple of years to fight us. And well, that forces us into the courts.
We are trying to get hold of Dr. Elise Stradham from the Chamber of Mines at the moment. Her phone going to voicemail, sadly. But now in the gold sector, negotiations underway, and 3 companies involved in those negotiations under the auspices of the Chamber of Mines, and all 3 companies have put forward different wage increase offers, so ranging from 7.8% for the company that's least profitable at the moment to 13% for perhaps a more profitable company. Is that not an answer that can be addressed under the collective bargaining system for your industry, for the manufacturing sector?
But you see, that illustrates the point, as there is no collective bargaining model in the mining industry. They may sit around the same table, but there is not a uniform approach, and that is also the right thing. You know, and unfortunately what is happening, and people have said to me, but you say small business cannot afford it, but let them open their books. We know that's impossible. How do you open the books of 10,000 businesses? You can't open the books, but you can look at the numbers. What is the effect? Now, if a company gives you an honest offer of 7.5%, which is already very high, and somebody else decide on 13 and enforce it on you, well, that will lead to job losses, which and I don't want to encroach in her area, but that is leading to job losses in the mining industry altogether.
What's your view on the collective bargaining system as a whole in terms of the fractions we're starting to see appear and the extent to which it's intensifying the kind of demands that are being put forward by labor unions in the first place, even if they do stand in stark contrast to the reality?
The big business is much more strike sensitive than small business. We've had the situation last year that we locked out a particular trade union for 5 months after a strike. Part of, not all their workers, but some of their workers. And small business approaches, you know, they don't ever have to return to work because we'll make a plan. Big business can't say that. So what you have here is that the role player that is more sensitive to the strike do the deal. And then extend that deal to the role player who's less sensitive for the strike, but also can less afford the increase. So that's unfortunately what you have here. And I think the system was designed specifically for that reason, keeping the big guys, because it's in their interest. A smaller employer, they're not at all scared of shop floor bargaining, not at all. Because the relationship is much closer. Big business find it harder. And what's also happened is that we've unlearned the ability to negotiate with our employees. We do it now on a different forum. Human resource specialists sit and negotiate, and the companies are no longer do it. And I say, well, if we can take it back, but if we can't take it back to the shop floor, at least have a dispensation where SMMEs can decide about their own fate.
Well, let's leave it there, Gerhard. Thanks so much for having joined us in studio this evening. Gerhard Papenfus is the Chief Executive of the National Employers Association of South Africa.